I've created a free folder that you can download. Just check the description, which has the exact assets that I've used during this video. This is just going to help you follow along. And some of the time-consuming part is finding the assets. So I've found them for you, and you can go ahead and download them. All right, let's get straight into it. Create a new project in CapCut. And the first thing we're going to work on is the background. So you'll see in the downloadable folder, there's a folder called background. Again, this has all the assets that you need to create the exact same background that I'm making. The first thing we're going to do is drag our paper 3 background onto our timeline, change your ratio to 16:9, and you can see that we need to then expand that paper background just by a little bit, 119%, in order to cover that background. I'm going to go to adjustment because one of the typical Vox styles is creating a bit of warmth in their image. So by going to the basic tab, I can drag my temperature a little bit up towards the orange side. Then what I'm going to do is drag my background so that this covers to about 30 seconds. This is obviously going to change depending on how long you want your sequence to be. And remember, you can always change this afterwards. So I'm going to leave it at 30 seconds just to be safe and make sure we have enough background. Then I'm going to drag our grid onto our timeline just above our background. And what we now need to do is expand that as well. So I'm going to just use my scale to expand that and then go to the remove background option, chroma key, and color pick in between the lines. This is going to remove that black so we have a transparent grid now. Then go back to basic, go to blend, and I'm going to decrease my opacity to around 15%. All right, let's work on these paper edges. I'm going to go to my adjustment tab and decrease my saturation and go back to basic and decrease my opacity to 20%. I'm then going to go to my effects and search for something called doodle. The first result that pops up should be Doodle Diary. Drag that and drop it onto my clip. Go ahead and drop stickers all the way to the bottom, and you can play with some of these values to get it the way you like. Basically, if you look within our photo, it creates some moving textures as we pan across here. A really cool effect. Let's go ahead and drop the scale of our corner and create 3 other corners by holding down Option or Alt on a Windows computer. We now have 4 layers on top of each other. On my first layer, I'm going to create some rotation and just drag that to the bottom corner like that. On my second layer, I'm going to do the same thing, just rotating another way. Again, this is really up to you and how you do it. What we can then do is highlight them all together, right click and say create compound clip, which is going to reduce them down to just 1 layer. You still have access to those files. If I double click on my compound clip, I can go into it almost like a folder and still find all my original files. And whatever change we do inside of the compound clip, if we go back to our main timeline by clicking that arrow, will have an effect on the main timeline. For the intro of this, go ahead and drag in the intro elements that are in the downloadable folder. Go to your text and create a default text layer. And we can drag this to 10 seconds. On my text layer, I'm going to change this to the word animate and use the font type DM Serif Display Regular. I'm going to drag this a bit bigger as well. Using the color option, I can click that arrow and drag our color wheel down to create a gray color of our text. I'm then going to duplicate this text layer by holding down Option and dragging it on top of each other. And here we're going to change this to like, and by holding down on like, we can move it just below animate. I'm going to add a bit of rotation and decrease its size by holding down on those little circles. Scrolling down on the text layer, I'm going to add a background and change it to the second background option and decrease the rounded rectangle option. I'm also going to lower our background opacity just by a little bit. In the color tab, I'm going to find a beautiful yellow hue that I'm going to use throughout the video. And then on my height option, we can see that this is a bit too big. So I'm going to drag that down a little bit. Going back to my media bin, I'm going to bring the yellow JPEG onto our timeline and extend it to exactly how long the other text layers are. Select it on my yellow JPEG. I'm going to select video and select mask, add mask, and let's add a circle mask. We then have the option to make it as big or as small as we want. And again, by holding it down and moving it, we can position it to anywhere on screen. I want to try and match the yellow that I used for like. I'm going to go to the adjustment tab and bring down a bit of my saturation. And by adding a couple of points of temperature towards the orange side, I think that yellow looks very, very similar. Going back to video, I'm going to go to Basic, go to Blend, and decrease the opacity a bit to match the opacity of like. We can then drag our Vox logo onto the timeline and decrease its size as well to fit within that yellow circle. I'm going to go ahead and drag my dotted arrow onto the timeline as well and decrease that size and put it between Vox and like. Going down to my text layers, I'm going to hold down Option and drag one above all of the other elements and change this to in. I'm going to straighten the rotation out by holding on the rotation option and move it to under the Vox logo. Scrolling down to my background option, I'm going to select color and select the color dropper where I can now drag it over somewhere on our background. And I'm just going to click once, and that's going to match the color of the background of in to the background color of our timeline. And lastly, I'm going to go ahead and drag the CapCut logo onto our timeline. And by going to Mask, adding a rectangle mask, I can drag so that we just see the text CapCut. Under the Adjustment tab and in Basic, I'm going to drag my black slider up a little bit to make my gray match the gray of the other words. And let's go ahead and drag CapCut down, decrease its size a bit, and drag it next to in. Assign animation values to the different text layers as per your choosing. One that you do have to pay attention to is animating the dotted line. By selecting it and going to Animation, I can swipe down until I find something called Screen Wipe. You can see that that has a cool wipe-on effect. Now I want my line to go from like to the Vox logo and not the other way around as it is doing right now. So all I'm going to do is hold down on that rotation and drag it the other way, and we can just reposition it. Now when we play that, you can see our line goes from like to the Vox logo. For both the Vox logo and the yellow, I'm going to apply a screen wipe transition. For in, I'm going to use the showing up animation, and for CapCut, I'm going to use a simple fade in. If we want to change the timing of how things show up, all you have to do is select your element and drag it to the left. You can now see that animate pops up and then like. Go ahead and drag your elements to show up in the exact order that you want them to. I think that looks a lot better. Once we're done with this, we want to keep a neat timeline, so I'm going to drag over all my elements, select them and click W. That's just going to trim them all to finish at the same point. From there, we can highlight all of our elements by dragging on the timeline and creating a compound clip. We now have the option to move all the elements as one. So I felt like they were a little bit low, so I just dragged them up. We can then apply a fade out animation to transition to our next scene. And remember, we made all of our intro elements 10 seconds. There's a reason behind that. What giving so much time allows us to do is now trim our compound clip to exactly how long we want. I can see my animations finish comfortably in around the 5-second range. So by selecting on my compound clip and dragging that over to the left, we now have a much shorter intro. Again, we're going to need to apply our fade out, and that's going to reapply that. Now, if we go and play that, you can see that we've created a Vox style intro. We're now going to move on to the map animation. Go to the map animation folder and let's go ahead and drag those elements into our project. Go ahead and drag your map onto your timeline, and let's go and select the remove background tool, chroma key, and then color pick the area that we don't want. You can see that that's removed that whitish looking background. If you don't get a clean cut straight off the bat, work with your intensity and shadow to refine how CapCut selects that. I'm going to go ahead and drag my map to around 15 seconds just to increase how much time I have that it's on screen. From here, what we're going to do is select these 3 lines and say export still frames. Make sure your resolution is set to 4K and we can rename this to map. Go ahead and select export. This is the only time we need to leave CapCut throughout this whole video, but in your browser, go ahead and go to Canva. You do not need a pro account for this. All you need is a free account and you can make this effect. I'm going to go ahead and select Create Design and select Upload Files, and let's go ahead and drag our map into Canva. Select Use in New Design and then select Custom Size and Create New Design. This is how we're going to do the draw effect. I know that I want the state Missouri to be highlighted, so what I'm going to do is go to the Draw tool, select the red option, keep this color as red, but decrease my weight to 7. I'm then going to zoom into Canva, and we can just start drawing by holding down our mouse key. This doesn't have to be perfect, but I think that looks pretty good. Once you're done, click on your background and hit backspace. That's just going to leave you with an outline that we just traced. Go to Share, Download, and save this as a PNG. Go ahead and select Download. Let's go back to CapCut and import our downloaded trace onto our timeline. I can go to Remove Background and select Chroma Key. Then just drag over the white. You'll see that it removes all the white, and what we're left with is a near perfect cutout that falls right onto our map. That looks really cool. Now let's animate this. Selected on my trace, I'm going to go to Mask, Add Mask, and create a split mask. Let's add a couple points of feathering. This is going to help smoothen out your animation, and drag that line up so that you can't see your trace anymore. Let's add a mask setting keyframe using this button right here. On your timeline, go ahead and drag that keyframe to the beginning of your trace. Go a little ways ahead and add another mask setting keyframe. And what we're going to do is drag this line down. You can see if we now play on our timeline, we now get a really cool trace effect that happens as our timeline plays. Go ahead and import your red background onto your timeline, and let's extend it like the others. I'm going to select Add Mask and create a circle mask. Let's go to Adjustment and change the way this looks a little bit by decreasing our saturation, going to Video and Basic, and dragging our opacity down as well. Going back to Mask, I'm going to decrease the size of the circle, and let's place it inside the state Missouri. The last element that would have been in the folder is this pointed arrow. Let's go ahead and drag that onto our timeline. You're obviously going to need to change the size depending on where you want that arrow to animate, but I want to go from Missouri to Idaho. Lastly, let's go to our plain red background. Holding down Option, I'm going to duplicate that, and we can drag that new circle into Idaho just where the arrow ends. A cool trick is to make this circle slightly smaller than your first circle. Now to animate the dotted line, select your dotted line layer, go to Animation, In, and select Screen Wipe. You'll see that our arrow now animates on our timeline. A great trick, if we go back to animation, is you can change the duration for how fast you want that animation to happen. If we make it 1 second, our dotted line fills out much faster. If we make it 4 seconds, you can see that that dotted line takes much longer to reach Idaho. Play with your duration value to however long you want it to be. I'm going to leave it at 2 seconds. For our little circle animations, go to Animation and find a cool animation that you like. Personally, I'm a fan of a really clean fade in. And like we did with the intro, it's now time to play with timing. I want my red circle to show up in the middle of our outline animation, and my arrow to appear only once that circle is done fading in. My second red circle I only want to appear as our arrow finishes and reaches Idaho. Go ahead and select those elements and click W to where you want to cut them to. We can then highlight all those elements and create a compound clip. Selected at the beginning of my compound clip, I'm going to add a transform keyframe. I'm going to scrub a little bit further along on my timeline and add another transform keyframe. On the second transform keyframe, I'm going to increase the size of my map just a little bit. I'm then going to scrub along as our arrow animates, and where we see that second red circle appear, I'm going to add a third transform keyframe and drag over to the left just like that. We now get a really cool motion that animates with our arrow. After your third keyframe, drag a little bit on your timeline, add another transform keyframe, and drag a little bit further and add a last transform keyframe. On this last one, I'm going to decrease my scale and add some rotation and drag that into the corner. I'm going to tab back to the second last keyframe, add a opacity keyframe, and then on my last keyframe, I'm going to drop that opacity by a bit. To make this smooth, go ahead and right-click on your compound clip and say Show Variable Speed Animation. In Scale, I'm going to highlight on all my keyframes and select Ease. Now we have a much smoother effect. On my X value as well, I'm going to highlight all those keyframes, select Ease, and on my Y, I'm going to highlight on all of those and select Ease 2. How you open those keyframe animators is by selecting next to the word in an open space. By clicking it once, it's going to go ahead and open that. If I click it again, it closes it. I noticed that the outline effect on my state takes a bit too long to animate in. So by going into my compound clip, I can go to that outline and drag the second keyframe closer to the first. Our next effect is an animated chart, one of my personal favorites. Go to the animated chart folder and you'll see that there's a plain black background. Go ahead and import that into your media bin. I'm going to go ahead and drag that plain black background onto our timeline near where our map animation is done going to the side. To create the X and Y axis, I'm going to add a mask and then add a rectangle mask. Go ahead and drag your mask until you see you've gone over the sides of your background. I'm then I'm going to zoom into my timeline and drag that mask just over the left-hand portion. I'm then going to do the same for the vertical axis. Go ahead and drag that mask until you can see you've gone over. And then drag that up just a little bit. We can then hit invert. You can see we've created an X and Y axis. Going back to my background, I can then drag that a little bit over to the side to shrink how thick that Y axis line is. I'm going to go to my text and add a default text layer and drag that to the duration of our black background. I'm going to make our text inflation, go to my color, match the color that we used in the beginning. I'm then going to change the font to Times New Roman. Creating a duplicate layer by holding down Option, I can go ahead and drag our second layer just below our x-axis and change this to year. On my first layer, I'm going to rotate it 90 degrees. It should snap in place. We can go ahead and drag that over on the left. I think my text is slightly too big, so I'm going to go ahead and make that 10 and make year 10 as well. From here, it's time to make our animated bars. We're also going to be using default text layers. Go ahead and drag that default text layer onto your timeline and create some underscores for the default text, just like that. You can then adjust the color to whatever you like. Scroll down a bit until you find the Transform tab and deselect to Uniform Scale. You can then increase the height and the width to your liking. I'm going to make our bars 900 points each. For this first one, I don't want it to be as tall, so I'm going to go ahead and decrease our width, just like that. Add 90 rotation, and then we can drag that. I'm also going to scroll down to Blend and change this to 60. In my Animation tab, I'm going to find an in-animation called Wipe Right. What this does is allows our bar to animate. But we can see it's animating the wrong way. So going back to text, I'm going to go to our plane rotation and select -90 to flip that over. We can then go ahead and drag our bar back in place, and our animation should animate from the bottom to the top. Again, going back to that animation, you can change the duration to however long you want, and I'm going to make that 1 second. Let's go ahead and make some more bars. By holding down Option, I'm going to duplicate those, and we can then change the color of our next bars. On my second layer, I'm going to go ahead and drag that across. I'm going to scale our width to 75%. That increases the height of that bar. We can go ahead and drag that in place. We should have the exact same animation as our first bar. And on my third bar, let's go ahead and drag that to the side. And I'm going to scale the width to bigger than our other one, and let's make that 90%. I think a fourth bar would look really nice, so I'm going to go ahead and duplicate our third layer. Let's change the color to green, change our width to 110%, and drag that over to the side just like that. From here, just like all the other segments, we can change how our animation happens. So I'm going to create a staggered effect by dragging my bars over to the side. We then have our first, second, third, and fourth bar animate at different times. From here, I'm going to select those layers that overlap and click W. Let's go ahead and highlight all of our elements and create a compound clip. Under Animation, I'm going to select the Slide Up animation. You can see that our bars are appearing slightly too early. So going into my compound clip, I'm going to select my bar layer and drag it all the way to the side just like that. Now when we play that, we wait for our animation to finish, and then our bars appear. Now on my map animation compound clip, I don't just want this to disappear, so I'm going to add an animation, go to Out and select Fade Out. We can then change that duration, drag that up to 1.5 seconds. That's going to create a smooth fade out effect as it goes away. We don't need to leave our chart animation on screen for too long, so I'm going to go ahead and trim that back portion, select it, select animation, and under Out, I'm going to select one called Slide Up. It's now time to work on our text highlight effect. Go to the text highlight folder and drag that element into your media browser. I'm going to go ahead and drag that onto our timeline. Under my adjustment tab, I'm going to add some warmth to this image so it somewhat matches our background. If you wanted to remove the background, you could go to Video, Remove Background, select Chroma Key, and then remove that background. But I really like the effect that this old paper has. At the beginning of that photo, I'm then going to add a default text layer and extend that to the duration of our photo. The same way we did the bars, I'm going to add some underscores on our timeline and change their color to whatever you want that highlight to be. I really like this orange effect. I'm then going to scroll down to Uniform Scale and deselect that. Then go ahead and scale the height to however thick you want that to be. I can see that 900 is a bit too big for our text, but I think 700 is great. You can also then scale your width just to match however wide your text that you want to highlight is. Go to your animation tab, go to in, and let's add wipe right again. Change your duration to however fast or slow you want that animation to happen. If there are two elements that you want to highlight, like in this case, I want to highlight these next words down here, I'm going to create a duplicate text layer and drag that all the way to the bottom. Let's finish working on this first highlight layer though. Select it on my first layer, I'm going to create a compound clip. Go to Video, Basic, and under the blend mode, I'm going to select one called Darken. What this does is create an effect which acts like our highlight is now behind our text. You can see that without it, our highlight is just on top of our text, and when I re-enable that, it moves behind our text. Let's start working on this second layer. I'm way too wide, so I'm going to decrease my width, and I know that my line is way too thick, so I'm going to decrease my height as well. I think that looks much better. Go ahead and create your compound clip, go to Video, Basic, and select your blend mode to be Darken. We now have two really nice looking highlights. I'm going to select all my elements, create a compound clip, and let's add some animation. First things first, my previous animation, which is the bar graph, slides up, so I want my next animation to be a slide up as well. I'm going to go back to my animation and just add a couple points to the duration of that slide up. Go to Video and Basic, and let's add a transform keyframe at the very beginning. Scrub a little bit ahead, let's add another transform keyframe, and then make a third transform keyframe a little bit ahead as well. On this third one, I'm going to increase my scale just by a little bit and drag until that highlighted text portion is near the center. Then I'm going to drag a little bit further on my timeline and drag up to reveal our second highlighted portion. Let's go ahead and see how that looks. That looks great to me. You can just see though that our highlights happen at the wrong time. So let's go into our compound clip and drag those text layer compound clips up. This is just going to require a bit of retiming, and going back to your main timeline. There we go. I got it on the first time. Go ahead and right click and say show variable keyframe animation, and we're going to now select something called cubic ease. That's created a really smooth animation. Go ahead and hide that keyframe animator. I'm going to go ahead and drag my compound clip a little bit shorter, go to my animation, go to out, and add a fade out animation. Going back to my media bin, I then have access to the word focus folder where I'm going to import all those elements. Basically what this is a bunch of different screenshots with the same word in every screenshot. Select it on your first screenshot, all the way to your last, hold down Shift, and that'll select all of them. We can then go ahead and drag those onto our timeline. You'll see that there was also a yellow JPEG in that folder. I'm going to go ahead and drag that yellow JPEG onto our timeline, go to Mask, add a mask, and let's create a thin rectangle mask where we want that specific word to sit. I'm going to leave it right in the center just like that, and I'm going to change the way this yellow looks like we did earlier on. On your yellow JPEG, go to Video, Basic, and let's change this to Darken. You may need to increase or decrease the size of your screenshot so that that word fills the box that we're using. Once you're happy with the placement of your first screenshot, drag that time to however long you want it. And now it's time to work on our second screenshot. Select it on that screenshot. I'm going to increase our scale so that our second word, inflation, fits right in that yellow box. And let's go ahead and do the same for all of them. After each one, I'm dragging the timing of that slightly shorter than the screenshot before. If you zoom into your timeline, you'll see the duration of that specific clip. For instance, this one is 1 second and 10 frames. This one is 1 second and 2 frames, and let's zoom in some more, and this one is 44 frames. So I'm going to just increase my duration by a little bit. The point here is that every screenshot gets shorter and shorter. This creates quite a cool effect. Once those are all timed, for my last graphic, I know I want to zoom out and show the entire line to bring attention to it. So I'm going to just drag my last screenshot a little bit longer. From here, I can add a keyframe on my yellow box in Mask and under Mask Settings. On my screenshot, I'm going to go to Basic and add a transform keyframe in the beginning, swipe a little bit ahead and add another transform keyframe, and then add a third transform keyframe where I drop the size of that box and recenter that screenshot. You can see that our highlight is much too small. So selected on the second keyframe of my screenshot, I can go to my highlight and under Mask, let's add a mask setting keyframe. Then over the third keyframe of my screenshot, I'm going to go back to my highlight and let's go ahead and increase the size of that mask. You'll then see that our highlight gets wider as that screenshot changes in size. Once again, I want to create a smooth animation. So I'm going to go to scale, drag that, and create a cubic ease curve. I realized that I'm troubleshooting problems as well during this project. I realized that some of the animations weren't playing as smooth as they should have, so changing it from full quality to high quality just lowered the resolution that we view this in. You could change it to medium or low quality if you need to. Something else that we have to troubleshoot is you can see we're at the end of our background. So by going into our compound clip, I would just go ahead and drag all these elements slightly longer. Going back to my main timeline, I now have the option to drag that compound clip as long as I would need it to be. This is the end graphic animation. Let's go ahead and import those elements into our media browser. The first thing we're going to work on is the White House animation. I'm going to increase the scale so that it covers our whole timeline. Go to Remove Background and select Chroma key, and let's go ahead and select that blue sky. By tweaking my intensity and shadow, it's created a really nice effect. We can then go ahead and import our eagle onto our timeline, but this time we're going to select Auto Removal. CapCut automatically identifies that blue and removes it. Let's go ahead and reframe that to the side, just like that. Our last layer is a default text layer, and I'm going to actually input this beneath both of our other layers. I'm going to rename this to American Inflation, and let's go ahead and use a Times New Roman font. Drag that slightly up. Once again on our color, I'm going to drag that down to try and match the gray from the beginning, and swipe down until you find background. Select the second option, remove the rounded rectangle, and on our background, we're going to go ahead and match that yellow that we used in the beginning as well. From here, it's time to animate those elements, so I'm going to select my text layer, and let's go and create a wipe right effect. On my White House effect, I'm going to go to Animation and select Slide Up. And on my eagle, I'm going to select slide left. We can go ahead and retime those elements. So I'm going to drag our text layer over to the right and our eagle over to the left. Now our White House pops up and we have our two elements come from the side. I'm going to select all of those and create a compound clip. At the beginning of my compound clip, I'm going to go to Video and create a transform keyframe. Swipe a little bit ahead, create another transform keyframe, and then swipe ahead and create a third keyframe. On this keyframe, I'm going to increase our scale by a little bit and add 2 points of rotation. Let's go to our keyframes, highlight those keyframes, and create a cubic ease keyframe. You can see this now zooms in a bit as our elements animate. Before we move on, I'm going to go ahead and highlight our previous effect, compound that, and create a slide up animation to match the slide in of our last effect. And by just dragging our outro animation forward a bit to overlap with this previous effect, it creates a very cool effect. Before we move on, I'd then go through my timeline, watch it a couple times, and finesse any timing or duration things that I don't like. Some of these things could include some of the way the animations work, but I'm pretty happy with what we did right now. Now for the last step, we're going to be working on the music and the sound effects. By going to Audio and then Sound Effects, CapCut has a whole library of sound effects that you could use, such as markers, highlights, etc. I've created an ultimate editing pack that has so many great sound effects, so I'm going to be making use of that. The first sound effect I'm going to use is a whoosh sound as the word animate pops up. Selected on that audio track, I can go to basic and increase or decrease that volume. The next sound effect I want to use is a highlight for as we outline our state. Wherever we highlight text as well, we want to use a highlight sound effect. For our word highlight effect, I'm going to be using a digital camera shutter sound effect. Now what you want to do is just time that shutter sound effect wherever the word changes. And now it's time to select your music. The typical Vox sound effect is something with a piano or classical sound. In CapCut, you may want to retrim to a suitable section of the track. Over here, the song kind of naturally ends, so I'm going to go ahead and create a cut point, delete this, and add a beautiful crossfade. The very last thing you need to do to tie this all together is go to your effects and search for lag. This is going to reveal the FPS lag option, which we can then drag over our entire timeline and extend to the duration of our timeline. Change your speed to around 40. The FPS lag effect adds a very cool shutter effect which kind of replicates stop motion. It takes all your smooth motion and adds a bit of choppiness. A very, very typical Vox style of editing.